In Bill Calhoun's words, after proceeding east on Highway 1 several more miles, we turned off on a gravel surface road and headed toward the mountains. Well, this here is Highway 1 going north. This here is what is now the Tokaido Road. We moved through the old sugarcane fields several miles, fording a broad shallow river, the Imbang River, and stopped and detrucked at our first bivouac area. The road we were on was the Tokaido Road. This is shown on the Imbang River map as a railroad. And you can see here that old sugar railroad. These are the old narrow gauge tracks that the steam trains used to run up. And back in those days, this was just a narrow space between two cane fields heading up towards those mountains. That's where we're going. So here we are on the rather improved Patag Road, Silay Patag Road. Improvements have been made, let's say that. I think there are still a few places where it's possible to see the railroad tracks, but that might be a little bit further up. At the moment here, I'm pretty sure that the road widening removed any of the remnants of those tracks. There's your old tracks, and there's the old trail. There it is.
Meanwhile, on April 7th, units of the 503rd Parachute Infantry Regiment also made an amphibious landing on Negros. This is the unit that won fame fighting on Corregidor Island in February that year, but they were now placed under the command of the 40th Infantry on Negros. I don't think they took that too well. By late May, there was a front line that stretched almost 80 kilometers up onto the high slopes of Mount Canlaon and the long ridge line of Mount Mandalagan to the north. And that forms the natural barrier between the west and east coasts, which is where the Japanese had chosen to dig in.
Well, here we are with another testament to the talents of the 161st Engineer Battalion. Look at this outstanding piece of handiwork. 85 years old. Look at that. A standing bridge. You can call me a coward for not driving over this one in my Jeep. But this is what happened to one of these old Bailey bridges not that long ago. And it's a little bit disturbing. So bear with me. This again is another one of those river crossings that would have just been impossible and certainly impractical if not for those combat engineers. My hat is off to those guys. What a wonderful job. New bridge, old bridge. I just want to put in a personal note here. Right now we are in August. August is the rainy season. That does not mean that it does not rain at other times. It certainly does. However, August is definitely not the hottest month of the year. In my time living here in the Philippines, on this island anyway, I would have to tell you that April or May are the hottest months. And that is exactly the time that the guys of the 503 were traipsing up this Tokaido road. It's hot now. I'm sitting here and I'm sweating, even though we're moving 40 kilometers, 50 kilometers an hour in our Jeep, and I'm still sweating. It's about 33 degrees, and humidity today, they said, would be about 88%. Humidity would have been about the same in April, May, but it would have been a couple of degrees warmer still. One of the things that I do notice is that from Bill's accounts, or from the accounts of the other soldiers on this expedition, there might be some mention of it being wet, but I didn't see anybody complain about the heat, and I find that quite impressive. In case you were wondering, that stuff that's growing on both sides of the road here is indeed cane sugar. That is the major industry on this island and in this region, the Visayas. And if you're interested in the history of that industry, there is another video that I'm filming concurrently with this one that you can see linked above. What's interesting is that the local guides who have blogged about Patag, they write about the road as if it's some terrible ordeal to drive up here, and make it sound like the ride in the jeepney is equally horrendous and so on, but it seems like a pretty decent road. But now you see that the terrain is starting to get a little steeper, and we're starting to come into areas with these gullies and other features. And this, I believe, is where the Japanese started mounting their first serious defenses, whilst crossing the flat cane fields. They would have been far too exposed to have stood and fought. So I believe that this is now coming into the areas where the first serious defenses would have been. And there in the distance, well, not so far now, are those mountains which were always there, reminding the invaders that that is where final prosecution would have occurred. by mid-April, the 2nd Battalion had advanced eastward far enough with the engineers behind them building the Tokaido Road, or upgrading it to the point where artillery and tanks could use it. And then we got into this area. And here, as Bill says, the country was growing more rugged. The flat fields were long past. It was now parallel ridges separated by deep draws. And you can see one here. The closer we came to the foothills, the higher the ridges, which were mostly clean of trees, uncovered by grass about 3 feet tall. I'm guessing that that's now been replaced with these crops that you can see. Vegetables here, sugar down there. Bunkers containing machine guns were placed so that they were mutually supporting. Some of the deeper draws were heavily wooded, but most of them were clear with clumps of vegetation like banana plants. Those are banana trees right there. And the enemy defenses were growing more and more elaborate. Bunkers containing machine guns were placed so that they were mutually supporting. Yeah, so coming up into what Bill describes as the foothills, the road gets quite a bit steeper, and it would have been more of a challenge for the engineers to work on this. And the going would get slower and slower as these draws, as they call them, get deeper and deeper. At least, yeah, the flip side to that is it does get quite a bit cooler, which is nice.
Yeah, but why this place called Patag when
this place is not called Patag. The place up there is called Patag.
Yeah, but why they call it Patag when it's on the slope, on the mountain?
Because we're not there yet.
Oh.
When you get there, you'll know.
Oh. Because Patag is
Means a flat place. Yes.
Oh.
So again, this is what we're looking at when we're talking about deep draws, you know, deep gullies. That's that would be a bad defensive position if you were approaching up this road. You're coming up this road, or you're making this road, and you've either got to go through this gully and risk being shot at from above, or you've got to come up the top of the ridge and risk being shot at by guys up there. Not a great spot. And here we have the camouflage tree. These ones are specially genetically engineered to help hide soldiers. Of course, I don't know what the population of this area was around the time of the war. Certainly it would have been lower than it is now, so I don't know how much of this land would have been cultivated at that time. But you can certainly see the sort of terrain that we're dealing with. Rolling hills that look easy from a distance, but I can tell you, you start trying to schlep up those when there's no prepared path and it's just jungle, it's hard work. And these are the Central Mountains now. And up there, yeah, there's your Knob Hill.
There's a lot of cafe house.
Yeah, they've built it and they're making more. Yeah, there's another one.
Yeah. Baguio. Patag, Silay.
Some rather impressive old trees. That's pretty cool. Impressive trees. I guess that's a 20mm cannon. I don't know if this is the original position. How could you know? I don't know. But, well, if it was, it would be, you know, quite a commanding position. 19th April. 3rd Battalion and 2nd Battalion rotate. 2nd Battalion is now taking over as the main assault battalion. F Company had been following the assault battalion and patrolling the flanks. The battalion was just to the south of Tokaido Road, down there. April 20th, infantry. Firefights in progress continued unabated with no gaining ground. Familiar story. Our troops maintained the positions reached and dug in. During the night, machine gun and mortar fire again harassed our forward elements. In our assault to secure high ground to the front, 4 companies all met with mortar, machine gun and rifle fire from well dug in enemy positions. So again, these are the well prepared positions on the steeper slopes up here. G Company was attempting to secure high ground to its immediate front as the period closed. If secured, G Company can aid the 2nd Battalion with flanking fire and fire on enemy caves in reverse slopes. Discussion of securing high ground to the front really had little meaning. Each succeeding ridge was held by the Japanese and each next ridge became the high ground, always under their control until we forced them off it. So again, it's this familiar story that they're in a very good position until you throw enough artillery and mortar at it and force them off of there, and then they just move to the next higher ridge up the mountain. April 22nd, infantry. G Company advancing with its objective, the higher ground, was forced to withdraw under heavy machine gun and mortar fire. They're firing back. The enemy lost a known killed in action during that fight. H Company reported 1 enemy killed whilst attempting observation of the position. So they're trying to reconnoiter the American positions. 2nd Battalion constituted our forward elements, continued its firefight until dark, consolidated on the 100 yards gained. Mortar fire fell on E and F companies during the night, killing 4 and wounding 3. H Company repulsed an estimated 60 to 70 attacking in 3 columns. The enemy left a known 10 killed in action before withdrawing. Results of operation.
Our advance, though small in yardage, gained valuable high ground to our front and flanks. It's believed H Company engaged and inflicted severe casualties on approximately 25% of the enemy's right sector troops. This estimate based on G2 reports of approximately 200 enemy in that vicinity. April 26, Infantry, 2nd Battalion, D Company received 4 rounds knee mortar fire. D Company began an assault on the high ground after a concentrated barrage from artillery, tanks and mortar fire practically neutralized the ridge. An enemy machine gun and knee mortar were captured. D Company sustained a dawn attack by an estimated 30 enemy. 20 were killed at point-blank range, including 1 officer. F Company moved a platoon to the high ground vacated by D Company. Results of operation. With the addition of our 3rd 1st Battalion combat team, the combat team has begun to exploit the extreme left flank to a much greater width. This area has been viewed with suspicion since the operation began and is now proven to contain many enemy strong points. The early morning attack seems to indicate that the continued pressure and assaults are contracting the enemy's forces, with the result that he is attempting to hold his position by counterattack. Those are the intelligence reports. What does Bill Calhoun think? This supposition, in my view, was just wishful thinking on the part of someone at regiment who didn't have the foggiest notion either of what was going on or what we were really up against. It may have made good reading at the higher echelons. As events unfolded over the next 3 months, it was evident that any contraction of Japanese forces was their choice and not because of our actions. In hindsight, it might be interesting to conjecture as to what would have happened had they put up a main line of resistance. With our air and artillery superiority, that may have been the worst thing they could have done. General Kono was waging a really effective, in-depth defense. And here's the line. At no time during the Negros campaign did we have the Japanese just where we wanted them. They're playing a very, very smart game, extracting the maximum number of American casualties for their own forces expended. April 29th. This was our last defensive perimeter on Tokaido Road, the left flank of the 185th Infantry Combat Team. The company would remain here until 12th May. We would establish an outpost a mile up in the rainforested foothills. The trail led to the high hill in the heavy forest. We would patrol heavily every day, but the company perimeter would remain here until 12th of May. Finally, on this day, the regimental combat team's advance changed from a southeast to a northeast direction, and extensive reconnaissance of the route to be taken later in force was made. No contact has been established at this time. Reconnaissance further southeast established the fact that at least part of the enemy's forces are still in that direction. So this is the direction of what we've been calling the secret trail, which runs around the hills behind me and back around to that ridge over there. Our immediate strategy is to split the enemy in the area from the southeast. A holding force of 1 battalion will be maintained at the combat team's limiting point. Our immediate strategy is to split the enemy in the area from the southeast. A holding force of 1 battalion will be maintained at the combat team's limiting point. The battalion gets a break from this area and then moves back to Bacolod and then up the road to Murcia and to Santa Cruz and assaults on the other side of that hill. A visit to the Japanese shrine in Patag. And Patag, you see this word in Visayan, it means a flat place. And in the middle of these mountains, that's kind of a rarity. This is the epicenter then of the final
legs of the fighting. The Japanese, obviously, they had their positions in the mountains around here, and this is the direction in which they were able to make a frontal assault. As you can see, we're surrounded by mountains, so there's no way to go around and make a flanking attack on those kind of positions. They have pillboxes set up on those ridges up there, and your only hope is to approach from this direction with your artillery and with your mortars and just pound them and pound them and pound them until you can make a direct climb into those positions. And that's exactly what they were doing. Ask him what he knows about the fighting here.
Alam mo ba yung Japanese ano dito, yung war, mga story?
Hindi masyado.
He doesn't know.
Nope.
He doesn't know that much.
Mahogany trees.
The government are the one who planted also.
Okay.
Kaya may nursery kayo.
Japanese shrine. And here we are. It's a little bit overgrown at the moment, but in the absence of these young mahogany saplings, this would be a very attractive viewpoint indeed. Some of the Japanese style lantern holders around. Thatched roof. Could use a little work. And an austere Shinto style shrine. Interestingly, the inscription is only in English. This Japanese shrine is in memory of a Japanese Filipino and American soldiers who died for peace during the Second World War, September 25th, 2003. Was there a Japanese mission here to recover remains and repatriate them to Japan?
Some Japanese missionaries came up to just visit, and sometimes they were like also asking them to where are the Japanese leftover or stuff like that.
Right. So now we're on our way to an American-Filipino shrine, which we didn't know existed. It's not on the maps, but we're going to take a look. I don't think we quite need low ratio just yet, but we're in four-wheel drive. So this is the way up to the American shrine. Slightly better, well, more recently made probably. I think that is a representation of the wavy bolo. I think that's called a kris, in memory of those Filipino and American soldiers who sacrificed their lives on this hallowed ground during World War II, which culminated in victory on September 9th, 1945. Yeah, World War II Veterans Memorial. Yeah. The style of this one says local construction. Just the style of it. Again, another very impressive spot. We're another 100 meters or something above the Japanese shrine, just a little bit further up the valley. Arnold says that he has walked from here to Campuestohan, which is the next battleground after here, in about 3 hours. So that just gives you an idea then again of how short that route is. And it's called the Secret Trail, right? Have you ever heard that before? Secret Trail. Yes, Secret Trail. There we go. The Secret Trail, 3 hours hike. So this up here. Not too terrible a spot.